Welcome to our interactive, participative brainstorming lab this afternoon as part of the FOODSECURE project. I'd like to ask you that we kind of evenly distribute ourselves around the tables, because it is quite an important part of the interactive part that we have roughly even groups. So if I could ask from the two back tables, could one person come and join each of these front tables?
The lady stand.
Would you like to come and join us here? Thank you very much. Is that okay? All right. That looks slightly more evenly spaced out. Okay. My name's Jill Adams. I work for the company Prospects, and today here for this workshop I'm the moderator. A small role to play. The workshop itself, or the session itself, was the idea of Thom, who is actually the co-leader of the FOODSECURE project, and we'll be hearing more from him later on. What is FOODSECURE all about? FOODSECURE is an EU-funded project which is looking into the food and nutrition security up to 2050. Would you like to just come and join us here? Here you go.
Just take that here.
Yes, I'd like to. Maybe I will sit over there.
Oh.
I'm replacing Tassos.
Okay, great.
Okay,
well,
please come and join us. Thank you.
Sorry. Tom, good to have you.
It's looking into the food and nutrition security 2050 through in-depth data gathering, modeling, analysis, policy analysis, participatory multi-stakeholder processes. That's basically what we're doing today. Yeah? A group of stakeholders, a participative kind of process to get your input into future visions, policy actions, advice. Eventually the project is planning to prepare recommendations, advice for policy makers. So thank you very much for coming to the session today. What we're going to do specifically, one of the objectives or one of the work packages of the project is integrating views from stakeholders on food security. You are a group of stakeholders, and we greatly looking forward to having your views on the vision for food and nutrition security in 2050. Particularly today, we're identifying visions, working on what is that vision. Having a shared vision can help us then identify what are the pathways, what are the actions that we need in order to be able to get there, and identifying those key choices that need to be made. Welcome. Quick run through the agenda. This introduction, I hope, is only going to take another minute or so. Thom is going to start with a quick overview of the FOODSECURE project in a nutshell. What is the project, and a little insight into some of the first results that are coming out from it. And then we're going to be spending the majority of the session on the brainstorm. We're going to be starting individually. What is your individual view on how would you like the picture of food and nutrition security look like in 2050? And then we're going to be combining that together at our table groups and then in the larger plenary group. Your input to the vision is one part of the process. We also have two speakers from the Commission. Jean-Pierre Halkin, who was here just a minute ago, and he's just gone outside for a moment. He'll be joining us again in a moment. And somebody replacing Tassos.
Yes, Jules Sides from DG Agri.
From DG Agri, Jules. Thank you. So I think I'll hand over directly to Thom to give you an overview of the FOODSECURE project and a little insight into some of the initial results.
Let's just continue. So, Jean-Pierre, please, you're most welcome. So, thank you all for being with us at this session. I would like to just take 10 minutes to explain the the scope and some of the intermediate results of the FOODSECURE project. FOODSECURE is exploring the future of food and nutrition security, and we do that with a team from different disciplines. And of course we are all facing the same challenges, and especially if we take a long-term perspective on food and nutrition security, then we're going to see a lot of uncertainty and risk on the different components and the different dimensions of our food system. And there is a world food equation, which is basically an economic view of looking at how supply and demand will meet. And as we all will probably know, is that there is enough food on the planet. It's just how we distribute it. But there are serious choices to be made as to how we will be making sure that that equation also closes in the future. And then also, which are the actors on board that are going to be helping us out as part of the solution. So for that, in order to be able to support the European Commission specifically as an important global player in food and nutrition security, we've developed a project and we've received a grant from the European Commission for designing effective and sustainable strategies to assess and address the challenges of food and nutrition security. So we want to both analyze and develop the tools, the concepts and the data to be looking at the challenges and the policy issues in food and nutrition security, but we also want to go the extra step in entering the policy debate and the policy discussion. And although we focus that discussion on the European Commission, and actually the European Commission is a really a multi-headed entity, and I think we might touch on that as we go during the session. We also want to make sure that those policies are sensitive to the needs and the questions outside Europe, because a lot of impact is made of European policies beyond Europe. So this is, in a nutshell, is our project. We're with 19 research institutes, mostly in Europe and some beyond, coming from different disciplines. We are funded through the Social Sciences and Humanities program, and we come with quite a few economists and sociologists, but we bring also on board a team of environmental scientists and data experts, as well as poverty experts, to enrich the discipline, and then also people trained in agronomy. And we're actually looking for these people who can build bridges across the different disciplines in the project. We're also speaking, as we're doing today, with stakeholder panels. You will be the stakeholder panel of today. We have invited a number of students here to bring in the youth dimension into food and nutrition security, because we are talking policies up to 2050. Well, I'll be not really old, but relatively old in 2050. But we should have some people who are still in their professional careers in 2050 also at the table today, and give their visions and discuss and make sure that we bring that into the discussion. So big thanks to the students who are here. We're in a phase of the project where we have intermediate results to present, and which we also present to stakeholders such as yourself. And we are starting to condense all that work from an €8 million grant into policy messages. And not only that, we want to make sure that the results of our project can be picked up by people in different organizations, not just the technical scientific experts, but also the people in the Commission, really high ups, such as Jean-Pierre, or more at level of policy analysts, but also people preparing policies in the NGOs and in the different regional organizations and at country level. And for that, we will make sure that our results are being put into what we call an interface, a navigator, to help you navigate the complexities of the food system with data, with ideas to get inspired, and so on. So, just quickly, the components of the research program are threefold. We will go back to the basics of what explains food and nutrition security. So we will be trying to understand the determinants with better data, asking the same questions all over again. In terms of the future, where does that understanding take us into a perspective on the dynamics of the food system? We are very aware that when you want to make policies today on food security, they will have long lead times. So we'll need to make sure that these policies actually are rooted in a good perspective on how the future might evolve. And we don't know that, but we can certainly develop scenarios and with qualitative tools and quantitative tools to help us there. And we also need some kind of surveillance as to what food crises might come ahead of us, even though we haven't seen them for a number of years. So we also work on that. And then based on these two streams in the project, the work on price volatility and the work on long-term modeling and scenario development, combined with the evidence, gives us an underpinning for work on guidance towards the European Commission and other stakeholders. So in terms of just taking you through a few intermediate results, and they are preliminary, but I still feel confident to mention them to you. This is a framework. So we started as a food security project, and already in the title we said it's important to go for nutrition, but making the linkages between food security and nutrition in terms of the analysis is actually quite difficult. And we have a number of conceptual frameworks in the program which are rooted in either the one field or the one strand of literature or the other. And we're looking, of course, at the crossover. And what has been interesting for us to find is that this framework on actually the UNICEF framework for improving child malnutrition is a very sensible framework also for food security. Actually, food insecurity is an intermediate outcome in that framework. Could also be framed as a very relevant outcome in itself. But what we did find is that there's very limited, there's a lot of interventions in this framework that are being put forward by programs and by researchers and analyzed by researchers, but there's actually very little analysis on the basic causes. And the basic causes we see is the social and economic and institutional system that are driving many of the results as you go through that framework. So understanding interventions at a specific level is important, but relating that back to the, let's say, the very basics of how societies are made up, how natural resources are being governed, is actually missing in a lot of instances. Second, from that perspective, actually this is, Anna, this is your dynamic slide. I'll see if I can make it work. They should be starting to move, actually, these bubbles. I'll try again. Okay, so the point is that income and income growth, of course, which is what you see on the horizontal axis here, is increasing for a number of countries. And we see undernourishment coming down, as you would expect. So there's a pattern to go from the left-hand angle being undernourished and poor towards the right-hand angle being rich and better fed. But if you look very carefully at the data, then you will see that there are actually very different patterns that you can disentangle from that movement. And those patterns, they don't relate to the size of the growth or the volume of growth. No, they relate back to these underlying factors, including, let's say, the equality, what growth does to equality and its inclusiveness, but also the basic services in terms of health and education and infrastructure, as well as the policy framework in place and the different political systems in which these growth patterns evolve. And that's what we want to examine.
Excuse me, what does it represent, each dot?
Excuse me?
What is it, each bubble?
Yeah, oh, sorry, I should say that. So each bubble, forget the colors for a moment, but the size of the bubble corresponds to the size of the population of the country. So we have big bubble, China, India, two big countries, and there's a lot of smaller countries sprawled around it. Third point, we had, when we started as a project, 2012, we were at the height of the second food price crisis. And it has been driving, and we were actually developing our program in between these two crises, 2007-8 price peaks and 2012. So it's been driving a lot of our attention in the program on food price volatility and the impact of that on food and nutrition security. And as we got through time up to the point where we are now, we are seeing that food prices have come down quietly, and there's much more stability in the market as there was compared to a number of years ago. So what we have said is that, does that mean that the food price issue is off the table, that volatility is off the table? No, it's definitely not. First of all, we're saying that volatile food prices are normal. There's a regular volatility in the agricultural markets, and people will certainly vouch for that. But it's the excessive volatility that should concern us. And even though with this data, so we've created data to identify and to disentangle excessive volatility from food price, normal food price fluctuations. And the data show no hits for 2013 and 2014. But we have good reason to believe that that volatility will return. And because of that, we've invested together with other funders in a program that allows us to predict excessive food price volatility with a 3-month horizon, and using data from the futures market to get to that point. And of course, much of those drivers which will hit upon agricultural markets will be through agriculture, from the natural resource system. And I think that we are looking at a number of recurrent and recurrent stresses on the food system. But there is also this, which we all understand, but there's also this element of surprise which can really take us aback. And this element of surprise that can create the excessive volatilities or the real uncertainties are sometimes also policy. And this is one of the reasons why a policy analysis in our project gets so much attention. Policies can be both beneficial elements and both beneficial responses, but they can by themselves also create greater uncertainty and risk. So in order to, now you should start taking notes. No, seriously, in order to examine these different drivers in the socioeconomic system, in the natural resource system, in over different timelines up to 2050, with different policies affecting, we use a toolbox, and this is at the heart of our project. We've developed a computational toolbox, a laboratory for computation, to examine the different impacts. And this is one of the major achievements in this project, that we have these tools and these models talking to each other, and the different research groups that are building, and they come each with their different perspective. From an agricultural market perspective, from a natural resource or crop modeling perspective, from a livelihood and household perspective. And simply by bringing all these groups and all this evidence together, that's where we feel in the end we're going to be confident that with that and the evidence base, we'll be able to do an underpinning of what would be a long-term strategy for food and nutrition security from Europe. And there are a number of domains already mentioned throughout the presentation which will have an impact on food and nutrition security, and that are actually put forward as policies by European policymakers and member states. But there's not a lot of dialogue, or not a consistent dialogue across all the different directorates and houses where these policies are made, as to what their impact is on food security. Sometimes it can be, there's a question of coherence across these policies, but there's also a question of building on each other's work to create the maximum impact. And I hope that FOODSECURE will help with that. So back to today. We are now at a certain moment in our project flow, where we started in 2012 and we're finalizing in 2017. And this development of evidence base and modeling is still ongoing, but we are now really interested to hear your vision and your views from stakeholders as to what these dynamics are in the world, and what's actually the point of convergence that we can find amongst ourselves and that we should be working towards. And if we have that, we might be able to put some of that into our modeling frameworks and work towards that, or reason backwards from that. And so from there on, that's the process that we'll be finalizing this year, hopefully with some of your input from today. We'll be developing the navigator system and doing a bit of road mapping with policymakers, and then do our write-up, and then we close. And then I hope that food security will still be on the table, but that the conversation is much more evidence-based and more productive than today. Thank you very much.